Look, this episode is from season 6 of Voyager, and by that point, I don't blame anyone for being so bored with the show that they start wondering what the characters from TNG are up to just out of sheer desperation. But that goes for the audience, not the writers. This is a review of the Star Trek Voyager episode Pathfinder. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know what a sad, humiliating nightmare Lieutenant Barkley's life has become, be warned. Spoilers beyond this point. Once again, the creators of Voyager have decided they don't want to make their show and would like instead to make an episode of another show. So let's see what happens in this episode from Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 13. We fade in on an apartment on Earth. Sounds like someone's at the door, and oh, Jesus Christ, Barkley jump scare. This is Barkley's place, and he rushes around trying to tidy up before finally answering the door, and it's Counselor Troi. He invites her in and immediately offers her chocolate ice cream because that's one of the 2 or 3 character traits about her people would remember. She says yes to the ice cream, but just 1 scoop. I'm watching my figure. Troi finds a seat in Barkley's apartment, which is spacious but very badly designed. Why is the replicator up a flight of stairs? That's not convenient. What if you're making dinner for your guests and you have to carry all the food down the stairs? The architect didn't know the place was going to be occupied by a socially isolated dud like Barkley. Anyway, Barkley gets Troy's ice cream and they make fan servicey small talk. Troi says, I think Geordi's jealous I didn't invite him to come along. And Barkley says, yes, I was hoping to get together with him before the Enterprise left orbit. Right, I bet Geordi's just been dying to hang with Barkley. Actually, it is Geordi. Then Barkley's cat jumps up on the coffee table and helps himself to some of Troy's ice cream, and Barkley grabs the cat like, Neelix, bad kitty. He named his cat Neelix. Troi says, maybe we should introduce him to Data's cat, Spot. But I have the feeling you didn't ask me over to reminisce. What's wrong? A professional writer did write this teleplay, correct? The actors aren't just reading from a story someone posted to FFN. Anyway, Barkley confesses his problem to Troi. I've lost myself, he says, in Voyager. I've become obsessed with Voyager. Okay, Barkley, I've seen this before. You're not obsessed with Voyager. You're letting it autoplay in the background while you do other things. You're not even paying full attention to it most of the time. That's why you think it's good. Probably against her better judgment, Troi asks Barkley to explain. So he does, and we transition into a flashback. It seems that Barkley has left the Enterprise and now works on Earth for a Starfleet project called Pathfinder. He's been working on a way to contact Voyager in the Delta Quadrant using a deep space communications array called Midas, and as a part of that work, he has created a simulation of Voyager on a holodeck. Barkley's boss, Harkins, finds him in the Voyager simulation, and he's like, hey, what about those diagnostics I told you to do on the thing? Barkley's like, sorry, I'll get right on those. And then maybe tomorrow we can tell Admiral Paris about my theory that we can point the Midas array at a pulsar and use it to create a wormhole through which we can send a message to Voyager. I've located the ideal pulsar to use in the interstellar phenomena forecasts from Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine reference, mark that off on your fucking bingo card. Harkins is like, just do the fucking diagnostics like I told you to do. And when the Admiral is here tomorrow, keep your mouth shut. And also, come over to my place for coffee so I can fix you up on a date with my wife's sister, because I hate her apparently. Turning down the generous offer to have an awkward forced social encounter with his boss's sister-in-law, Barkley waits for Harkins to leave, then goes back into his Voyager simulation, this time with holograms of the Voyager crew. It's not super accurate due to the limited knowledge Starfleet has about the current status aboard Voyager. The Maquis crew members are still in their Maquis clothes, for example, and also, when Barkley walks in, they all treat him like he's the coolest, most awesome guy in the world. He sits down to play cards with Chakotay, B'Elanna, Harry, and Tom, and they're all like, go easy on us, Reg. Give us a chance to win, even though you're the galaxy's greatest poker player. So we're watching Barkley's self-insert Voyager fanfic in an episode of Voyager that feels like a TNG crossover fanfic. It's fanfic all the way down. Barkley goes back to his place and tries to get some sleep, but he can't, so he returns to the holodeck, has the doctor give him a massage, then spends the night in his fake quarters aboard the fake Voyager. He wakes up the next morning, still aboard the fake Voyager, and all his best friends, the fake Voyager crew, greet him eagerly in the mess hall and immediately begin competing for his time and attention, and I just feel so sad watching this. So inexpressibly sad. Admiral Paris shows up for his visit to the Pathfinder lab. He's played by Richard Hurd, who is probably best known for his roles in V and Seinfeld and for not being Carl Malden. And Harkins tells Admiral Paris all about what they've been working on, but he doesn't mention Barkley's pulsar wormhole theory. And finally, Barkley can't contain himself any longer, and he speaks up without permission and blurts out a bunch of stuff to the Admiral about his plan, which would allow two-way communication between Earth and Voyager. Paris turns to Harkins like, is what this gibbering nincompoop's saying true? Harkins is like, not really, and then Harkins sends Barkley home for the rest of the day. Back in the present, where Barkley is telling all of this to Troy, Troy's like, so what did you do then? And Barkley says, I went right back to work. Troy says, oh, so you consulted with some of your colleagues on the Pathfinder project? Barkley says, no, I went back to the fake holodeck Voyager to refine my pulsar plan with my best friends, the holograms of the Voyager crew that I programmed to adore me. We cut to the briefing room on fake Voyager, and Barkley is leading a meeting with the fake Voyager crew, and with the help of fake Harry and fake B'Elanna, Barkley realizes that to communicate with Voyager, he doesn't need to create a great big wormhole, just a teeny tiny wormhole. Barkley goes to fake main engineering to continue working through the problem while tossing a future space ball back and forth with fake Chakotay, but Harkins shows up and snatches the future space ball and says, what the fuck are you doing? Don't you think you're spending too much time in the holodeck, taking this Voyager thing a little too far? Why are you playing catch with holograms when you could be contracting an incurable but manageable STD from my sister-in-law? Barkley says, I'm just trying to find a way to talk to Voyager. Do you have any idea what it must be like for the people on that ship? Can you imagine how lonely they are, so far from home? Harkins is like, they're probably pretty okay about it. He sends Barkley home and threatens to call security to make sure he actually goes this time. So, Barkley does the only thing he can do and immediately goes over his boss's head straight to Admiral Paris. He meets the Admiral in his office and goes, oh, hey, is that a picture of your son, Tom Paris, on your desk? And the Admiral's like, yeah, pretty much. Barkley tries to convince Admiral Paris to give his pulsar wormhole plan a chance, but the Admiral is only willing to have the plan reviewed. He doesn't promise they'll actually try it, and he doesn't clear Barkley to go back to work. So, back in the present once again, Barkley tells Troy, that's why I wanted to talk to you. I need you to call Admiral Paris in your official capacity as a counselor and certify that I'm okay to go back to work. Troy says, I can't do that. Barkley's like, why not? Troy's like, you have a cat named Neelix, dude. Troy tells Barkley that she's decided to take a leave of absence from the Enterprise to stay here on Earth and help him get over his Voyager fixation and learn to make some new, real friends. Barkley's like, thanks, that means a lot that you're willing to do that for me. And then that night he breaks into the Pathfinder lab to try and execute his pulsar wormhole plan because he really is obsessed with Voyager. I want to cry so hard. Barkley goes up to the computer in the lab and types in load, *8, 1, and it boots right up. He does the thing he wants to do with the pulsar and succeeds in creating the teeny tiny wormhole and sends a message through, hoping to reach Voyager, but he gets no response. Then Harkins shows up with some security goons like, step away from the controls, Barkley, and Barkley transfers the controls to the holodeck and escapes into his fake Voyager. Harkins tries to shut down the holodeck, but Barkley has locked everything out. On fake Voyager, Barkley keeps trying to get his message through to real Voyager. Harkins gets sick of fucking around, so he enters the holodeck, goes to fake Voyager's engine room, kills fake B'Elanna, and sets the fake warp core to overload. Then he heads to the fake bridge where Barkley is and says, I'm blowing up your fake ship. This holodeck program is ending one way or the other. And Barkley's like, fine, you got me. And he ends the program so they don't have to do a special effect of the ship exploding, which is thoughtful of him, but Damn, imagine how embarrassing that is. Not only does your boss walk in on your holographic hero fantasy where you're the smartest, bestest guy ever, again, but then he forces you to shut it down and you're just left standing there in the middle of nothing. That's gotta suck. I'm glad I don't know what that feels like. Meanwhile, on real Voyager, which we are seeing for the first time in this episode of the TV show Star Trek Voyager, Neelix walks into the astrometrics lab like, should I be flattered by the cat thing? Or insulted? 7 of 9 blows him off, I says, and checks the sensors where she notices a teeny tiny wormhole that just opened up nearby. And coming out of that teeny tiny wormhole is a message on a Starfleet frequency. She calls the bridge, and Captain Janeway's like, let's hear it. And a garbled, staticky fragment of the message Barkley sent plays over the speakers. Back at the Pathfinder lab, Admiral Paris walks in like, hey, I know it's the middle of the night and it's weird that I'm even here, but I had my team at headquarters look over Barkley's plan and I think it's worth a shot. Harkins tells Admiral Paris that Barkley already disobeyed orders and gave it a shot and it didn't work. But then someone working a control console says, hey guys, there's a message coming in from that teeny tiny wormhole. The message is from Captain Janeway aboard Voyager. Barkley jumps on the call and he and Janeway say hello. Then Barkley warns her that the teeny tiny wormhole is collapsing soon, so they don't have much time. Barkley transmits plans for some new communications tech that will hopefully allow them to get back in touch in the future, while Janeway transmits the ship's records back to Starfleet. Then Admiral Paris says, Captain Janeway, how are your people holding up? Janeway says, they're fine, including your son. Admiral Paris says, tell him I miss him, and I'm proud of him. Janeway's like, he's sitting right here, motherfucker. Tell him yourself. I ain't your answering service. The call gets dropped, but it worked. Harkins apologizes for doubting Barkley, and Admiral Paris is happy and casually rechristens Project Pathfinder as Project Voyager and tells Barkley that it's all thanks to him. Over on Voyager, the crew throws a party in the mess hall and drinks a toast to Barkley, whoever the hell he is, and back at Barkley's apartment, Barkley and Troy drink a toast to Barkley's success in contacting Voyager and also, apparently, his success in closing the deal with Harkins' sister-in-law. Sounds like Barkley lost his virginity, everybody! Aw, that's great. What a nice ending to this episode of a series that has been out of production for nearly 6 years at that point. So, as you can probably tell, I have certain issues with this episode. Let's start with the fact that it's a Barkley show on Voyager, which shouldn't exist because Barkley is not a character on Voyager. Sure, Voyager has done episodes before that featured characters from other shows. They did some Q episodes, one of which featured a pop-in from Riker. Sulu appears in one episode, etc. But those episodes all still centered the characters from Voyager. This isn't an episode guest starring Barkley. This is a Barkley episode. And worse yet, it's a Barkley episode where Barkley, not a character in the series, does something super important that one of the actual characters in the series should have done instead. Voyager getting back in contact with Starfleet is a big deal. I could make an argument that they never should have gotten back in touch with home until they actually made it home in the series finale, but leaving that aside, even though the stranded tens of thousands of light years from home premise was largely squandered, even though, with the exception of a few episodes scattered across several seasons, the crew of Voyager didn't seem to really feel the weight of their situation, establishing communication with Starfleet is still an ace the creators of the show had up their sleeve. It's a narratively important, emotionally impactful moment that could have, and should have, been the payoff to a good episode. The crew has been stuck in the Delta Quadrant, completely cut off from home for 6 years at this point, and then finally, Harry, or Seven, or B'Elanna, or ideally a combination of characters working together, figure out a way to reach out across that once seemingly unbridgeable distance and call home after years of being on their own, of wondering if they'd been forgotten. The silence is broken, and that gap between where they are and where they want to be feels just a little smaller. Instead, Barkley did it for them. Don't worry about it, guys. We took one of your big moments and gave it to a character from a completely different show. Enjoy the communications channel with Starfleet that someone else made for you. It's not as egregious as the decision to set the last episode ever of Star Trek Enterprise on a holodeck program being watched by characters from another show, but it's in the same category of baffling inexplicability. How did this make it past the initial pitch? I have an idea. Let's do an episode where Voyager gets back in touch with Starfleet. Sounds good. And let's center the entire story on Barkley and have him do all the work. Let me stop you right there and fire you. Too harsh? Look, I like Barkley. Hell, I love Barkley. His appearances on TNG account for some of my favorite episodes. If the writers of Voyager really wanted to import him into their show, I mean, it's not the most creative choice, but it's also season 6, and Voyager has borrowed a ton of shit from TNG already, so why the hell not? But to not only bring Barkley in, to center an episode almost entirely on him to the exclusion of the entire regular cast of the show, not counting their holographically simulated selves, and to make that episode about Barkley establishing a line of communication between Starfleet and Voyager instead of someone on Voyager doing that. I just don't see how that makes sense on any level. It makes even less sense when you factor in how paltry the character development is on Voyager. You've got a whole roster of characters you barely pay any attention to, who often seem so bland as to be interchangeable with one another. And you decide to focus on someone from a totally different show? Oh, and don't let me forget, they also brought in Counselor Troy to give Barkley someone to talk to, because obviously who else is a character from TNG gonna talk to in a Voyager episode but another character from TNG? They even end on Barkley and Troy. With the episode almost over, we finally see the actual crew of Voyager. They have no agency. They do nothing of importance in this story about them contacting home for the first time, other than to call back after they get Barkley's original message, and then the episode doesn't even end on them and the life-altering moment of getting back into contact with Starfleet. It ends with Barkley and Troy drinking a toast to Barkley's successful date with his boss's sister-in-law, which took place entirely off-screen, by the way, as if that's the most important thing. The joke I've used about this episode in the past is that it's the ultimate act of humiliation for Barkley, because after making him an awkward, anxious, friendless hypochondriac on TNG, here they make him the most embarrassing thing of all, a Voyager fan. But after I watched the episode again today, I realized I've had it backwards. It's not Barkley who the writers are humiliating in this episode. It's the series regulars, who are reduced to glorified extras in what should be their story. Okay, I think I've ranted enough about the episode's most fundamental flaw. Let me move on to some others. Once we move the why is this a Barkley episode issue aside, we're left with the problem that it's not even that good of a Barkley episode. Let's look at this as just a story and forget the Star Trek of it all. We've got a character, Barkley, who has recently moved to a new job and a new location, leaving behind his old job and his friends there who were like his family. He's having trouble making new friends and connecting to people, so he loses himself in his work and indulges in an old habit, the holodeck, which he begins using as a substitute for real social interaction. His obsessions with solving a problem at work and with spending hours at a time in the holodeck threaten both his job and his ability to indulge in his favorite habit, and these two problems are resolved by Barkley solving the problem at work by having his theory proven right and foregoing the holodeck to go out on a date we don't see with a person we don't meet. I don't find either of these resolutions particularly satisfying. Barkley vindicating himself by carrying out his plan to contact Voyager through a teeny tiny wormhole falls flat because it's so reliant on made-up technobabble that I don't get a sense of Barkley actually doing anything. The only part of the process of him solving the problem that feels somewhat relatable and real is when he hits on the concept that he doesn't need to create a big wormhole, that just a teeny tiny wormhole will do. Everything else is just a stream of incomprehensible technical jargon. Barkley does a thing with the computer, and at first it seems like it didn't work, but then it turns out it worked. Hey, all right, good for him, I guess. The resolution to Barkley's other, let's be generous and call it a character arc, is even more underwhelming because it happens entirely off screen and involves another character who never even appears and whose name we don't even learn until the final seconds of the episode. Hope, the sister-in-law of Barkley's boss Harkins. Am I supposed to care that Barkley has chosen to put himself out there and meet new, real, non-holographic people? Might have been nice to meet this Hope person. At least for a minute. Might have been nice to see Barkley interact with her, like, at all. Might have been nice if she had been the person Barkley was telling this story to all along, instead of Counselor Troy, who is literally there just to be there. Dwight Schultz is fine as Barkley. It feels like he turned up the nervousness and anxiousness of the character a little higher than usual for this one, but I guess it works if you interpret it as Barkley being even more of a basket case than usual due to having left the Enterprise and becoming fixated on Voyager. He does a good job with switching from real Barkley to big dick energy Barkley when he's interacting with the holograms of the Voyager crew. And if you view his scenes with the fake Voyager crew in context with all of his previous appearances on TNG, there is a certain poignancy to it. He's gone from a guy who used the holodeck to make himself into a larger-than-life swaggering hero in fantasy scenarios to a guy who uses the holodeck to make himself a guy with friends who want to spend time with him. I also feel like I need to point out that based on what he tells Troy at one point in the episode, Barkley is obviously using the Voyager simulation as a substitute for the circle of friends he used to have. He wishes the crew of Voyager was the crew of the Enterprise. So did the people who made Voyager, apparently. Pathfinder was written by David Zabel and Kenneth Biller from a story by David Zabel. This is Zabel's only Star Trek credit, but Biller was one of the main writers and producers for the entire 7-season run of Voyager. The episode was directed by Mike Vehar, one of the best and most prolific television directors of the 1980s and 90s. The writers are often left field somewhere, pretending that they write for a different show. The director is doing his usual steady job of bringing this misbegotten script to the screen, but it's really Dwight Schultz as Barkley who has to carry this whole thing. And he carries it fairly well. The problem is, carrying this episode shouldn't have been his job, and it's mostly dead weight. Those are my thoughts on Pathfinder. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would, if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Please join me next week as this spotlight on Voyager batch concludes with one more episode, and it's yet another one from Season 6. It's called Blink of an Eye. See you next time for that. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.